Being able to balance my personal and academic life.
It's starting off high school right so that I can get into a good college and have a good future.
While stressing out for college acceptances and rejections.
The pressures to do well in school and to perform well in sports and to meet the expectations of my family.
It's a tough problem, and one of the things we've seen over the last 40 years is that gap has been growing a lot, especially starting around the 1970s. A lot of things changed in labor markets, particularly there just weren't as many good jobs for people to have, and so that gap started growing. And then we also saw at the very top of the income distribution, corporate salaries just skyrocketed, especially in the last 10 or so years, and that explains that widening gap.
Essentially, the wealthy have been getting wealthier and the poor have been getting poorer. Middle class has been shrinking for many years. That's due to poor management in the government, and right now our government's non-functional, so really nothing's being done about it, and the wealthy are just getting wealthier and the poor are getting poorer.
The official measure, approximately 15% of the people are poor in the U.S. Similar number in California. But that doesn't take into account a lot of things like cost of living, and we know for example in the Bay Area that housing costs are really high. So for someone who's in the lower half of the income distribution, it's really hard to find a home and make ends meet on the types of wages that are offered. And so we've developed a new measure that takes these housing cost differences into account. And when we look at that, we find that California actually has the highest poverty rate when we look at this new measure that takes into account those differences in cost of living.
I had been in a lull for about 10 or 15 years where I settled for a status quo, where I got to a point in my recovery where I wasn't really better, but I wasn't really sick. And essentially I just lived in a home for 14 years and accepted whatever came my way. And I didn't realize my potential until I reached street teaching.
I think if you look at the research, there's very little to suggest that people are poor because they're lazy or something like that. And by the same token, I think a lot of what makes a person gives a person the opportunity to be rich is not something that they've gotten to by necessarily just by working hard. Now, that's not to say that they haven't worked hard. They probably have, but they've also had a lot of other circumstances that went their way, or they come from a family background that got them the education they need, and it's hard to fall out of that top rung once you're there. It's also hard to rise up from the bottom just by your own accord.
Way back to like the position that you used to be in society, or just at the pay scale that you used to be at, can be very hard, and times have changed, times have moved on, and during those times when I was going through my really bad anxiety and depression, a lot has changed. The stigma for a homeless person of any kind is, wow, those people are dirty, and why can't they clean up after themselves, because they always leave a mess everywhere they go. So having that sort of a stigma, you know, kind of, you see people treat people badly just because they're homeless, you know. There might not be anything wrong that this person's doing, but there's that, you know, connotation with that. Well, anyway, some poor people tend to forget that, you know, it hasn't been a great last 10 years for anybody. So the person who might have had 2 houses before and lived very comfortably or whatever, now they're down to 1. So they might not be looking to help the people less fortunate than themselves so much, because they're trying to cover themselves. So they're trying just to live their life. Not only do the people with more money have to, you know, maybe help out a little bit more, but the people who don't have that much, you know, they shouldn't just, you know, jump to conclusions about, well, they're rich, they don't care about us. That might not be the case. The case might be where, hey, that guy used to help out every year, you know, give money to different organizations that would help, Goodwill, whatever, but now they can't so much, just because of the way times are.
But, you know, I think there are some signs that maybe it's beginning to slow down, that widening. I think one of the main things that social policy needs to do is try to prevent people from getting into some long-term poverty trap. And, you know, there's a lot of good public policy programs that can kick in and help stave that off. Well, poverty rates, particularly talking about people in the lower end of the distribution of income, I mean, in the short term, you know, well, we can get people jobs, but maybe there's not enough jobs for people to get, or not, at least not enough good jobs. You know, one of the things that's been in the media a lot lately is the fact that minimum wage rates are just not high enough to, for some people, not even high enough to get them above the poverty rate for their size family. And so raising the minimum wage can certainly help in the short run. When jobs don't work, then we need a strong safety net to kick in, or when someone loses their job, we need a safety net that kicks in and helps them weather that period of unemployment. It's very important that there is a strong safety net in those cases, because those periods of unemployment can really be long-run detrimental to someone's ability to escape poverty.
See that we want to be part of the solution and not just part of the problem. That really, it changes the viewpoint of people that see homeless people, and it also changes the viewpoint of the homeless person in the fact that they can, you know, have a higher self-esteem and things like that. My goals for my future are basically just to, you know, get out of homelessness, get stabilized.
Well, I plan to pull down a full-time job eventually and just be self-sufficient and be self-independent of the Social Security Administration. I plan to one day step away from my benefits, and I really want to step up.